This is Paul Murray Live.
Of course, the new Prime Minister is in the air. He's on his way to the Quad meeting. He was sworn in today and said all the usual things you do when you get a new job.
I am incredibly honoured and humbled to have been sworn in as Australia's 31st Prime Minister. Australians have voted for change, and my government intends to implement that change in an orderly way.
But already the hot takes have started on the far left that Albo didn't even win the election. In fact, according to the bloke who I think still does finance reports on the ABC, this was Julia Gillard's victory. I'm sorry? Julia Gillard, who tied in 2010, is the real winner of the 2022 election. Well, probably because she became the ambassador to the United Nations. Rudd goes to the United Nations, Gillard goes to the US, and Bill Shorten goes away. KK, by the way, will end up failing up as always. She'll end up at the Holy See. Watch this place. But I don't know about you, but I saw the images today and they filled me with such confidence. They really did. We got it wrong, totally wrong. But seriously? That's your front line in rugby league or rugby parlance. These are, I think Rudd had his kitchen cabinet. This is the cafe cabinet. This is, this is the drum circle cabinet that's sitting around. Let's see how they do. Now, amazingly, despite the fact that, yes, it still takes a couple of weeks for all of the votes to be counted, and it looks like they will end up with a majority government, meaning they won't be defeated on the floor of the parliament, Albo, despite all of that hitting the ground running, has already said he's going to delay the return of Parliament. Wait till you hear the reason why.
The other issue, of course, is I will try to run a family-friendly Parliament. There is school holidays in July that have been pointed out as well. But we will resume Parliament in a very orderly way.
But we've got to wait for the school holidays. Okay, welcome to the new reality. But there was one big change that changed I don't know about you. It changed everything today. Now, the Prime Minister decided to bring two flags with him, being the Indigenous flag, representing Aboriginal people, but also the Torres Strait Islanders. Okay, fine, fair enough. Oh, didn't the media love this today? Remember when it was Tony Abbott has too many flags? Well, now Albo can't have enough. That said, where's the rainbow flag? Come on, mate. Why are you being so exclusionary? Where's the South Sydney Rabbitohs flag? And so on and so on. Oh, they loved it at news.com.au. They loved it at Channel 9. On a day of high ceremony, they loved it on the TV news as well. Everything's coming up Albo.
A hint of priorities to come. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags swapped in.
Changes already. All Australian official flags now take the stage behind the Prime Minister.
Oh, the big changes. And then there's also, I mentioned a little bit of sniping from the left. Now, remember last week when Albo was playing the race card because the Liberal campaign was, it's not going to be easy under Albanese. I agree, terrible, but still. He claimed that there was some sort of attack on his race. Well, we learned today via the identitarians at the Channel 9 newspapers that even though he's Italian, that's not diversity, because they just woke up to the fact that he's still a white heterosexual male. This cannot stand. Please, change. Now, for too long, we've talked about the fake independence as the teal independence, but of course, teal is the colour of the little boxes that when you buy something at Tiffany's, and they represent the richest electorates in the country, so from now on, they are to be referred to as the Tiffany independence. It was very hard for the people in their mansions, 2 years of having to decide whether to go to the TV room or the billiard room, so they went off and bought themselves some teal politicians, a Tiffany politician. Well, apparently now, parts of the teal movement have set their sights on taking out Labor seats. You see, I'll get into more detail about this later in the week, but as you know already, of the top 10 wealthiest electorates in the country, 7 are now represented by the Tiffany's. 1 is represented from the Liberal Party and 2 are from the Labor Party. So as the teal surge continues, as they run off to Tiffany's, get ready for Labor seats to be the next target. Now, don't say I didn't warn you. You may hear this a little in the next 3 years, and I stand by everything I said for the past 6 weeks. Might have lost the election, but believe me, we have not lost the argument about what is about to happen. And that far right-wing newspaper, the Australian Financial Review, has noticed a government that promises to spend every dollar as the previous government, plus copied 11 of their policies during the election campaign, and promises to have bigger deficits and bigger budgets, means inflation's going to go up even higher, even faster. And guess what that means? Interest rates. Now, of course, there's many people taking a victory lap, and they are so giddy at The Guardian right now. It's like peak Turnbull awesomeness right now. But I tell you who's a bad winner? Mark McGowan. Now, Labor has seriously turned the way of Labor. They are the reason that Anthony Albanese is going to be in a majority government and is not going to have to go and negotiate with the Tiffany independents. He's not going to have to go cap in hand to the Greens in the lower house. But this was Mark McGowan today, carrying on about everything from the media.
The press conferences I went to, they were screaming and interrupting and rude and insulting, intimidating and bullying. Sort of stuff that in a workplace you get sacked for. They need to reflect on their behaviour. I've never seen anything like it. He would conclude the press conference and say, right, okay, I hand over to Mark now, I have to go and do something else or catch a plane or whatever it is. And then they would pull their cameras off their stands and journalists would run at him and, surround him as he walked towards the exit after concluding his press conference. And then the reporting would be, he fled the press conference. It's just lies. It's just lying.
Oh, how dare they? Now, I know that Mark McGowan is not used to an adversarial press. After all, the West Australian reports on him. And Albo, too, didn't receive too much of a tough time from the West Australian. But you see, here in the rest of the country, you are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed a little bit of dissent here and there. In the People's Republic, the Emperor is not to be questioned. In the rest of the country, it's a free press. And whether you like it or not, they can ask you whatever they want with whatever volume. I noticed he didn't seem to have much sympathy when they were yelling at Scott Morrison for the past 3 years. No surprise. And you know that Peter Dutton, most likely to be the next Liberal leader, is already starting to annoy people in the Labor Party, because why would you have to say this about somebody who you think in your heart of hearts you can 100% beat like a drum at an election?
He's an extremist. He's an extremist. And I don't think he fits with modern Australia at all. And he doesn't seem to listen. He's extremely conservative. I actually don't think he's that smart. I've seen him present on things. I don't really pick up there's much there.
Seriously? Oof, what an arrogant so-and-so. Now again, he's at the peak of his powers and Labor did very well in Western Australia. But it brings me to 5 more things about the election that I want to talk about here. And as I say, I stand by everything I said in the past 6 weeks, but I'm not going to pretend that the government didn't lose, and I'm not going to pretend there's an asterisk next to the Labor's win. But these things all still matter, and it's why some perspective is needed right now for those that are smiling wide or those that are setting their hair on fire. Here's the truth, okay? No win is forever, and no loss is forever. Take that into consideration if right now you're sitting pretty or you feel like you're down in the dumps. All right? Today, we are one day closer to whatever's going to happen in 3 years, 6 years, 9 years, 12 years, or 24 years' time. Okay? That's the reality. It's tidal. It comes and it goes. Secondly, I'm going to make a prediction here. The Greens are going to start eating Labor. You see, for a long time, in fact, in many seats, most seats the Labor Party wins, they get there because of a sizable Green preference vote. You know that. I'm not breaking any news there. But I want to talk about one of the seats that they won at the last election. They didn't win a Liberal seat, they won a Labor seat. They won the seat of Terry Butler, the seat of Griffith. This is the place that Kevin Rudd used to represent in the Parliament. Now, she did all the things that supposedly Greens love. She was aggressive about the need for marriage equality. She was even the environment spokesperson for the Labor Party. But that wasn't enough. You see, the Greens went from being the backseat passenger to the backseat driver to the co-pilot and have now eaten her lunch. Let me explain. Now, the Greens in this seat are an example of what their next hit list will be. So while the Tiffany independents do their thing, the Greens are coming for ALP seats. They took one off Labor, the seat of Melbourne, the old Lindsay Tanner seat. They've now taken Griffith, the old seat of Kevin Rudd. And have a look at this. The primary vote of the Labor Party in that seat from 2013 to 2022 fell off a cliff. At this election, in the 2013 election, it was 40-10. Then it was 33-17 in 2016. Then it was 31-24 in 2019, where, thanks very much for a quarter of the vote, I'll add that to my 31, and now I've won the 2PP, 55-45. But guess what happens? When your primary vote falls to 29% and the Greens hit 36%, the Greens eat your lunch. So it didn't matter how many times she said the right thing on Channel 2. It didn't matter how big a Twitter warrior she was. And it didn't matter that she was the person who was, well, along with Chris Bowen, going to end the climate wars. She wasn't ideologically pure enough for the extremists, and the extremists took her seat. And they'll do it again to Labor. So the Tiffany's will do it at the rich end of town, and Labor will do it as well. And there is no mercy if you have kissed the ring in just the right and loving way every single day of your career. If you have the wrong jersey on, gone. And again, as I mentioned, in the Financial Review, their suggestion is that the Teals, the Tiffany's, I've got to get used to this, but I'll get used to it. The Tiffany's will start going after Labor next. Because as I mentioned, 2 of the richest electorates in the country are now currently Labor seats. So watch this space. In fact, again, I'll give you the details properly on the television tomorrow. But as you know, you only need 76 seats to form a government. 86 seats in Australia, 87 seats in Australia, I should say, are in the band of the net wealth between $500,000 and $300,000. You could form government in the middle, in the true centre. Because you see, it's not always ideological, is it? Rich people went and bought themselves some Tiffany MPs. And extremists used a useful idiot as their Trojan horse and then took over the horse. Another thing here. Labor have set expectations too high. Dare I say, Aussie Joe Biden is going to suffer from Barack Obama syndrome here. Remember, he was going to hope change, end the world, got a Nobel Peace Prize for not being George W. Bush. Then, of course, built cages to put kids in, and then, of course, turned around and said we were going to stop the seas rising. So here's the question. And even the right-wing identitarians and the Channel 9 newspapers are starting to notice this. Now, of course, they'll let him off the hook, but we have all the tape from the election. You remember everything that was promised, right? So in 3 years' time, or 6 years' time, or 9 years' time, or 12 years' time, or 24 years' time, these are the questions people will ask themselves before they vote next time, on top of everything else. Did you get a pay rise? Did they make everything cheaper to buy? Did they cut your power bill by 2025? Did 600,000 people get new green jobs? Did they actually fix aged care and turn it into a resort-style accommodation for everyone, or just throw lots of money at it? Also, another one here. Sometimes it is just cyclical, not only ideological. The reality is that, yes, this was a government going for a 4th term, and there's an it's time factor and all these other things. So despite the fact that right now all the lefties think, get ready, permanent rule, when we win elections, they're forever, when the other guys win, they cheat and they stole. If you set the expectations too high, people will turn on you. If interest rates go up and inflation continues to go up, people will turn on you. If the consequences of trying to play the extremists' game, they will turn on you. And finally, don't fall into the lefty trap of a liberal civil war. It's what they want. Now, sure, could we have lots of ideas about which way to go and what things we care about? Fine, okay. That's not a civil war. I noticed Green Keane was on the TV today saying that we had to pull back in terms of the Liberal Party, had to pull back from too many alpha males. Has anyone Googled what he's done in the past? And of course, alpha male really is just code for bogans. I look forward to seeing the result of the New South Wales election, particularly in the seat of Hornsby, where maybe a teal might take him out. Let's get into the conversation right now with Rowan Dean and the leader of the National Party, Barnaby Joyce. Lads, hello. So, just about Mark McGowan. He was a bad winner, right, Rowan? Like if you've just won, turning around and having a crack at the reporters because they don't sort of clap whenever you finish a sentence. But then also Peter Dutton he's not a threat at all, so let's start bagging him before he gets the job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to sit there and say Peter Dutton's an idiot and this, that and the other. There's a good point there, Paul. I loved your point about the Greens. They will carry on just attacking and eating the left. It's the old French Revolution come to life. Don't say you weren't warned, and the message is there. All the lovies, the bedwetters within the Liberal Party, they're the ones who lost their gigs, not the Conservatives. Peter Dutton's still there. Angus Taylor is still there. Those guys and girls survived. It was all the lovies and the lefties who got taken down for the simple reason, as your point about Mark McGowan, which I'll get to, if you don't attack your opponent, if you concede the battleground, the battle of ideas to your opponent and say, yes, basically I agree with your ideas, which is what the Liberals did by agreeing to sign up to net zero, then of course the electorate is going to go, but your opponents, they're going to do what you said, but they're going to do it better. So of course they're going to go for them. So watch that. But here's Mark McGowan. And Scott Morrison, I would make the criticism that what a mistake to go cozying up to McGowan during COVID and saying, yeah, you're great. We basically agree with everything that you're doing. When McGowan and Dan Andrews did the same thing, they just turn around and attack the other side.
I don't disagree. However, if one of the biggest reasons why they went so hard was because they went after the border situation, well, again, sort of they talked about Trump being post-truth. We're kind of post-logic for some people. Barnaby, what about those 5 things that I tried to say to the people who are disappointed because they expected, another 3 years, but more importantly, they feared what the next 3 years would be like. Do any of those points make sense to you? Is there a rallying cry around any of those, or am I off the mark?
Can't remember the 5 points. I was watching the other screen.
All right.
Hey, you like Albo with your 6 points, Barnaby. Your 5 points. Paul Murray's 5 points. You've got to remember that.
No win or losses forever. The Greens will eat Labor in the long run.
I was watching a hypothetical on your other screen here. It's distracting me. I'm sorry about that. But I'm sure they were very valid and smart. And I don't know what you said, but I completely and utterly endorse it.
Thank you, Mr. Shorten. I do appreciate it. All right. So, put simply, what do you want to say to people who voted for you for wanting to give you a big tick for what had happened in the past 3 years, but because they were afraid of what might happen for the next 3 years? I'm not talking about the Liberal Party, I'm talking National Party, because you guys held the line.
Yeah, we did. We held every one of our seats, even though 3 of them were retiring members. We picked up a Senate seat, and we were within basically a stone's throw of 2 other seats, Lingiari and Hunter. Lingiari is still actually in play, so unlikely, but a possibility. So we did a very, very good job against all odds. The Libs unfortunately lost 19 seats, and that's will, after the 1st of July, have a bigger party room than they had before the election. So how? Because, first of all, great work by party members, great work by members. We concentrated on a campaign that looked at where our threats were and where we had to sandbag and where our opportunities were. And we made sure that we covered the ground there, even areas such as central Queensland, rather than flying in, flying out, go up there and live there for a while, stay there for a few days. Continually make sure that you go to the areas such as the Northern Territory. Obviously a great campaign that was held in Nichols, and the guys down there went there a few times. But the people down there, especially retiring member Damien Drum, did a power of work. I know that Bridget McKenzie was also up there. She was working hard in that area. And then we also had to deal with teal-like candidates. And I acknowledge the great work that Pat Conahan did in standing up in his electorate in a tough fight and prevailing and making sure that he's in a strong position as he goes forward to once more cement in for the people of Cowper, a strong representative who can show the sort of delivery you get in such things as the Coffs Harbour bypass, the Pacific Highway upgrade.
So Michael McCormack says you were part of the problem and that there should be a change of leadership. All former leaders would say similar things. But how does it work now in terms of the National Party picking its leader? When do you all get together? Do you resign post-election? Do you expect there to be a fight?
Well, look, the Nationals always have, when we come back, we have the ballot for leader, and there's nothing. I'm not scared of democracy. That's great. That's what I love about our party, and I'm very comfortable with it. And so, this is an unremarkable statement, and I look forward to it. We'll have a discussion about policy. We'll have a discussion about ministries. We'll have a discussion about what are the guardrails of the issues that we want to work within in the coming period of time, and all the senior members of the party will have their say, and all the people who've just arrived in the party will have a chance to have their say, and that's the reason I'm in the Nationals. So, but on the former point, look, I disagree. I think the people in Wentworth they knew that they were voting for a Liberal candidate or a Teal candidate. I don't think any of them thought they were voting for a Nationals candidate. And it's just like saying, well, Tim Wilson was affecting our vote in Central Queensland. That is also an equally wrong statement. So I disagree with that former one. It's ridiculous.
Fair enough. Rowan?
Barnaby asked this of Matt Canavan yesterday. I asked you the same question. Was it a mistake to go to net zero?
Well, we wanted to make sure that we had a position that gave us the capacity to go forward into the election without... look, I'll be more honest that any person in a coalition seat or national seat who wants to have a debate on net zero or climate change, doesn't matter what your position is, you lose. You can't be right enough, you can't be left enough. It's not the area which you want to be discussing. There are so many other issues: defence of our nation, economic security, infrastructure. These are the areas that people want to hear, but you just go down the ABC wormhole if you start talking about climate change. So
sorry, Barnaby, as recently as 2019, sorry, Paul, you won government.
I get paid either way, so you can do whatever you want.
You won government by arguing against doing anything more on climate change. That's what won you government. I don't see how you can say this is the first time you haven't argued against climate change and you lost. Yeah, so that argument doesn't work.
So let me take you to something here, Barnaby, right, which is there's going to be a fascinating little start to the parliament, right? Which is Albo has said he wants to legislate 43%, okay? The Greens, now he'll get that through the lower house, the Greens will try to amend it to 50% or higher in the upper house. The pressure will be on the coalition to pass 43%. So speaking freely as a member of parliament, as well as the Nationals leader, but still as a member of parliament, when that vote comes up, are you going to do what Bill Shorten did after the 2013 election, which was not to repeal the carbon tax? Instead, they said they had a mandate not to do so. What's the mandate for the National Party when that vote comes to Parliament?
Well, we said that we didn't agree with the 2030 target. We said that quite clearly. It was part of our negotiations with the so-called 2050 target negotiations, because that would cause massive damage, because you can only do it by shutting down industry. And we see in the safeguard mechanism, which we campaigned on, the Labor Party are going to now tax 215 businesses, including the last 2 oil refineries in Australia, which will either hand on the cost to you or they will head over to Singapore. Now, we're quite happy for people to have, if it's the technology, not taxes, we're quite happy to put investments into the technologies, but we want to see them. They want to be apparent, they want to be effective, they want to be able to deliver, and they want to be able to provide people who are under $130,000, $140,000 a year in a coal mine with the same wages and the same conditions as they had, in the same number that had them. And this is the sort of the practical approach to a policy position where we are going, watching the numbers very closely. If the Labor Party at the Senate, they'll have to be in coalition with the Greens. And it looks like they might be in it with the lower house, and that's going to take rather some explaining by Mr Albanese, who said he'd never be in coalition with the Greens.
But Barnaby, why didn't you argue this for the last 5 weeks? Why didn't we hear a single word prosecuting the economic case, not the moral case, the economic case against climate change alarmism? We didn't hear a word. Was this Crosby Textor or someone telling you guys not to talk about climate change?
He talked about it.
Why didn't we hear enough about it?
Rowan, what I just said then, I was saying all the way through the campaign, especially in central Queensland and the Hunter Valley, all the way through it. And it's probably the reason that we're holding the seats that we hold. We held every seat, including those seats like Dawson and Flynn, which were, when you really think about it, in the wave that was against us and the tide that was against us, they would have been seats that others would have thought we were going to lose.
But you've just proved my point. Where you argued the case, you won. In Wentworth, Warringah, Kooyong, everywhere you didn't argue the case or prosecute it because you had people who wouldn't argue it, you lost. Pretty slam dunk, isn't it?
Yeah, but my view is that those Tiffany's Teals, they were going because they can afford all of these things. There's 87 seats in that middle band that I talked about before that are the people who have to pay for the consequences of these things. Again, what's interesting here is, as I said, the trap that the left want to fall into is that it's all ideological and there has to be a civil war about it. Now, I don't know right now whether climate change as a political thing becomes like the boats for Labor, right? Which is they've got form, but they had to find a way through to meet a threshold of where people were. In terms of that discussion, Barnaby, again, there is a lot more than just climate, but for 10% of people who went and voted freedom, it's absolutely front and centre. But then obviously, we're near 76 seats, and in part that's because the front end of the other end of the coalition lost seats in part based around this position. So, as I said, there's trouble for Albo trying to get it legislated, but there is also, a giant question mark about how to respond as the opposition. I know what the Canberra Press Gallery is going to demand. I know what Facebook's going to demand. No disrespect, but I know what Rowan's going to demand.
Really?
But how do you play this next phase?
I just think that the Labor... I mean, right now, the Labor Party have just got themselves elected. So you've got to have a period where you say, congratulations, Mr Albanese, and I really do wish them all the very best. Our nation depends on it, whoever the government is. But it's going to be chaos. I can see that coming a mile away. With the Greens, with the Teals, watch it. And I think the Australian people will see it, because each one of the so-called Tiffany's, Teals, whatever you want to call them, are going to have their own ideas. They all want the spotlight shining on them. They'll get the spotlight shining on them by saying more and more sort of kind of out there statements, and the Greens will want their time in the sun, and the Labor Party will have to bend towards them, and then you'll have the sort of division of the Labor Party, as he pointed out, wanting to try and match the Greens, and what happens in the end? She all falls over.
Yeah.
Now, I've been around politics a while. Watch this space.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And that's the thing, Rowan, about the wider issue for the next 3 years, which, again, we said it for the past 6 weeks. It's why I'm confident in the fears that I had of the past 6 weeks, right? Which is there's no way through without the Greens in the upper house, all right? Which means if Albo's going to try to put it in as legislation, it's going to get fiddled with. I know the giant thing here is that, they're going to wedge the Liberals on it. They're going to get no result out of it. So if Albo's smart, he doesn't go anywhere near the Parliament on this.
Well, the problem is that he's promised to reduce the cost of living, as you said brilliantly at the beginning of the show, but he's also promised all this ideological claptrap on climate change. Now, the two are mutually incompatible, so something is going to give. All that Barnaby and the Liberal Party have to do is sit there, as Barnaby is suggesting, and watch the implosion, the economic implosion occur.
Well, we've just seen that small target works.
Well, this is why it's critical that the Liberals and the coalition sits there and focuses laser-like on the economic damage that they are doing with their policies, because they are going to be manifest and manifold, and the Australian people in 3 years' time, Barnaby, are going to be down on hands and knees begging for a Dutton-led with Angus Taylor as Treasurer and whoever as Deputy. That laser-like economic focus with you guys there, Australia's going to be begging to have you back in that hot seat in Parliament, I promise you.
All right, we'll see. Thank you very much, lads. Do appreciate it. All right, good on you. Thank you, guys. Ray Hadley standing by. Let's get his thoughts on the election, the way forward. and the mess of the next 3 years. More in a sec here on Paul Murray Live. Ray Hadley joins us right now, of course, the king of AM radio, of course, multiple-time Hall of Famer. He deserves a second shot at it. He joins us right now. And I noticed today, mate, before we get into anything else, that the flag above the Tower of Talk at 2GB was at half-mast, and we should please just, get the sentimental music playing because, I mean, the career of Christina Keneally, look, it's never over, it's only ever paused, but, I mean, just the people of Fowler, really, they had a chance, this great immigrant story of a lady from Las Vegas, but alas, they chose a Vietnamese refugee to actually be their local MP.
I've started a campaign to get a statue for Di Lee in the middle of Fowler because such is my gratitude for her for what she did. I can tolerate 3 years of Labor. I've been through it before, but I can't tolerate 3 years of Christina Keneally. However, I'm terrified that sometime in the foreseeable future there'll be a retirement of the Senate and she'll be parachuted into the Senate as she has been previously. Don't do that to us. I think the Holy See might be a safer bet, as you've indicated earlier. Now, look, I don't want you, Paul, to get blood pressure problems like I have regularly.
Yes.
But I heard you talk about Matt Keane a bit earlier.
Oh.
Okay? Now, Matt Keane, he was going to be the saviour, the panacea for those moderate Liberals in those seats that have been taken by the Teals in Sydney particularly. We're talking about Sharma, Zimmerman, Falinski. He was going to solve all the problems. He didn't solve them, he created some. Obviously, they all lost. Then he goes on the ABC today and says, look, the problem's this. The problem is this. We didn't go far enough to the left. Hello? We didn't. Look, Matt, you would give an Aspro a headache. You didn't offer candidates who offered any opposition to the Teals. You didn't. I mean, the way Matt Keane's going, it was suggested to me by someone on air today, I think it may have been Terry McCrann from News Limited, that perhaps Matt should change allegiance for the 2023 election and perhaps be a Green up there in Hornsby or a Labor member, a Labor candidate. Seeing he's so filthy on everything Conservative, he needs to change things around. But look, the definition of idiocy and stupidity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting this, a different result. Now, can you imagine that someone would actually say today, in light of, the absolute pounding the Liberal Party copped, and Barnaby enunciated it perfectly, Nationals didn't cop a pounding, they've drifted too far to the left. So what is Matt Keane's panacea to that? Let's go further to the left. Let's go let's have 60%. Let's have 60% by, not 43% like Labor or 50% that the Teals want. Let's make it 60% by 2030. I mean, look, my grandfather used to say, look, son, either pee or get off the pot. And I'd say to Matt Keane tonight, either pee or get off the pot. One of the two. You are the third most senior politician in the New South Wales government and you're behaving like a Teal with a green tinge. Wake up yourself, Matt, for God's sake.
So let's talk about the wide array of what went wrong. Now, look, you and I like Scott Morrison, but pretty obvious that the electorate was done and done for a long period of time. And that's difficult to say, obviously, about a person that we both like. But what else went wrong?
Well, I think the Prime Minister had run his race. A fourth-term government, and his second term, no one's been elected in those circumstances before, given we've had, a Prime Minister sort of raffle through the Labor Party and the Liberal Party for quite some time. But I think what they need to really do, that inane campaign, there's a hole in the budget.
Oh.
I mean, the Lord of the Rings animated series of Mr. Albanese. For goodness sake, find someone, a good old-fashioned advertising agency who can get back the grassroots and get the message out there, because the message was lost among all this gobbledygook that they wanted to appeal to people on social media. Another point was made to me today that I hadn't really thought of. You think of the young people aged 18 and above who probably voted for the Greens or for the Teals or for the Labor Party. They were in primary school the last time Labor were in power. They have no idea of what we, you and I, other people lived through during the time of the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd years. They've got no idea of the frailties of people like Chris Bowen, Mark Dreyfus, Penny Wong. The list goes on and on and on. They don't know what happened back then. They're new to it. They're, voting for the first or maybe the second time. They don't know what happened last time Labor in power. And so this idea that Labor is the answer because Scott's run his race and Peter Dutton's too far to the right, and the ridiculous stuff from McGowan today that
Please.
Extremists, please. Honestly, I know it's good to gloat when the West Australian Labor Party has absolutely blitzed the opposition, but you've got to be a bit fair dinkum, Mark. And that was not fair dinkum. That was just taking a really cheap shot, at an unfortunate time. And they can, of course, congratulate themselves, as they should, because, they ran a good campaign and they won in the end, despite the frailties of the now Prime Minister and the mistakes that he made. But time was there for change. But the Liberal National Party, more particularly the Liberal Party, have got to come up with something a bit better by the time we get to 2025 than what they trotted out this time. It was just sheer stupidity.
So what are your thoughts about Peter Dutton as a potential leader? All signs seem to suggest that he ends up there. What do you think?
Well, there's no one else left. Josh Frydenberg, he fell to a teal himself. He was the only other alternative. So Dutton's got to take the challenge. He's up to it. And, as opposed to what Mark McGowan said, I know him particularly well. He's very, very smart. He's very astute. And he will take the Liberal Party back where it belongs. And, he won't tolerate the nonsense from some... It's good that Zimmerman's gone. It's good that Sharma's gone. It's good that Felinski's gone, good that Wilson's gone, because he wouldn't tolerate that nonsense from them. If he was leader, he'd say, boys, pull your head in, we're looking for wood, we are a Conservative party. We are not trying to push ourselves to the left, we're not trying to get in line with the Teals to curry favour. Look, they've got to appreciate, and so is Matt Keane, there are people who will never vote Liberal. Stop trying to curry favour with them. They'll never vote for you.
Yep.
Never. So get back to the Conservative side of politics, get the people who want you in power to vote for you, because plenty this time have turned away from you.
Well, and as I talked about before, right? So, and I'm not calling them the Teals anymore. They're the Tiffany Independents, because that's the same colour as the box you get from the shop, right? So the Tiffany's, fine. They got 7 of the 10 richest electorates. Good luck to them, right? 87 seats in the Parliament have net worth across the seat of between $300,000 and $500,000. All right, now. Pretty even split between Liberal and Labor. The vote of the Liberal Party went up at this election in welfare-dependent seats, right? And we know what happened when it came to the Labor Party. Now, that doesn't mean something's ready to change in 3 years' time, but the obvious opportunity, and by the way, when we say Conservative, we're not saying it's time to get in a time machine and go back to 1950 or, 2010 or even 2019. We're saying 2025, that's the focus, right? So there are some things that you've got to moderate and change. That's the way it works, right? But there are so many normal people who want an opposition leader, in this case, to stand up for normality, not to fall into sort of the lack of logic of the Tiffany's or the dreams of the Greens. Or frankly, Albo is going to get whacked at some point in time by people who were promised a pay rise, promised that bread's going to be cheaper, promised that petrol's going to go down, promised that nursing homes are going to turn into resorts. If none of that happens, those people in those seats of the 87 that I talked about will thump Labor at some point in time.
Look, Paul, it's very simple. The electorates that now have Teal representatives are well equipped to put up with a really drastic increase in power prices. That's got nothing to do with the Labor Party or the Liberal Party. That's just going to happen. Wholesale prices have gone up immeasurably, and that means retail prices are going to go up. Now, that can be accommodated in those seats I've spoken about. They're wealthy, wealthy seats. Those people can accommodate it. Mount Druitt and Logan can't accommodate it. They can't accommodate a price increase in their gas and their electricity. They can't accommodate it, but they're going to have to wear it. Something's going to have to go. So, while they have all these feel-good policies about, let's get rid of coal-fired power stations, we've got 6 left and let's punt them out the door. And then while they say China, and I think Allegra Spender said during the election, China's leading the way. I think you might have quoted her on that one. They're building dozens and dozens and dozens of coal-fired power stations. They're using some of our coal to fire those up. They're making wind turbines, sending them back here that we put up on hills right across the country with Chinese technology aided by Australian coal. Now, you figure that one out, because I can't. I mean, if we shut down our coal-fired power station tomorrow and sit in the dark with a lantern, it would make not one bit of difference to the way the world will shape up and combat climate change. Yep. You've got to get India, you've got to get China, you've got to get the US on board, and until you get them on board, we're whistling in the wind here in Australia. We aren't that big. We aren't that big.
Yeah, correct. And also, until Allegra puts, a windmill in the middle of Centennial Park, we know they're not fair income. But of course, that would upset all of the dog walkers. We mustn't allow that. Our staff need to, be in peace. God love the Tiffany's. Anyway, I'm going to bang on about that for the next 3 years. Ray, awesome to talk to you. Looking forward to talking to you soon. We'll hear on the radio tomorrow.
All the best, mate. Thanks very much.
Thank you, great man. Ray Hadley, straight after the break. There was a little thing that Labor snuck in the last day of the election campaign after lunch. And if you have got more than one tree in your backyard, you're going to want to hear what Matt Canavan and Chris Smith are going to talk about next. Just before the election, in the final act of a dying political career, Terry Butler, who, remember, was the environment spokesperson for the Labor Party that was going to end the climate wars. Well, she, of course, was eaten up by the Greens, explained why, and I explained how that's going to be a phenomenon in the next little while. Well, she announced that Australia is going to have our very own version of the EPA, which, once you started to read into the detail, would, among other things, be very serious about biodiversity and very significantly quite aggressive about tree clearing if you're somebody who has a couple of acres or, God forbid, an actual farm. Senator Matt Canavan has been returned to the Parliament for another 6 years. Congratulations, my friend. The tree police are on their way. And Chris Smith is here as well, who I love very much.
G'day, Chris. How are you, mate? And hi, Paul. This is an outrageous attempt by the Labor Party to sneak in a mandate for extra green tape on our nation's farmers. They actually took this policy to the 2019 election, and while it didn't receive the same profile as Bob Brown's convoy, we up here in central Queensland made hay with pointing out to farmers that Labor's policies would mean that they would need to go to Canberra now to seek approval to develop their own land, their own property, not just to Brisbane, which is already a hassle in Queensland. And so that cost the Labor Party dearly. And I was wondering whether they were going to do this, and they slip it out on the Friday night before the election. So we couldn't tell the people about Labor's sneaky plans, and now they'll obviously claim some sort of mandate for it. But the upshot for people here, Paul, is that the world needs us to grow more food. There are food shortages emerging around the world, and one of the world's largest wheat exporters, we should be developing more land, building more dams. That's what we took to the election. Labor Party was silent on dams. But if you're going to employ a lot of tree police in Canberra, there won't be farmers developing food and creating jobs in rural and regional areas, and they'll effectively have their property rights stripped away from them when this happens. They bought land, they thought they could develop in the future. Someone comes along, puts a regulation, puts red tape over them. They're not paid any compensation. This is not the castle. They just have their wealth depleted by more regulation and red tape.
And out there today in the Australian, all of the rent seekers are already saying they're expecting a lot more money from government when it comes to green projects, Chrissy.
And an announcement today from Albo that he wants to protect public servants, that he wants to treat them with the respect that they deserve because they're right up there. Sorry, that's where we've got to drive a bulldozer straight through the public service. Can I go back to what Matt just said? He's right on that score. On another score, it just shows how much replication of waste the Labor Party has in their DNA. It's the replication of waste. So you want an independent EPA to do what the government has been elected to do, which is look after trees and look after the environment. We've got an environment, we've got a state-based, territory-based EPA right around the country. But so what do we do? Do we do it with Treasury? Do we have an independent Treasury body that looks over the Treasury Department? Do we have an independent defence body that looks over the Defence Department? Talk about replication, and it's begun.
Yeah, I mean, also, Matt, look, in the Senate, if there is an attempt to legislate 43%, we know the Greens will try to up it and therefore maybe reject it. We know that the media pressure will be, well, the Libs must back them in. You remember seeing what happened in the Senate when Shorten wouldn't repeal the carbon tax. He had to wait till there was a new Senate in July of the following year. This was part of the left's agenda to deny Abbott early wins. Why should the National Party or the Liberal Party be playing along with the early wins of Albo?
Well, exactly, Paul, and hopefully we'll have the guts here to defend the interests of our constituents and the nation by holding the government to account in the Senate. You're right, the Labor Party and the Greens will likely have a majority on their own together, although the Labor Party will need the Greens or the coalition to pass anything through the Senate. So, of course, we should be constructive when we need to be, but we certainly shouldn't be selling out our principles and our constituents just so Labor can pass their radical agenda. So on that chopping block, we should be opposed to new taxes that are imposed on our mining industry or other wealth-producing parts of our country. We should, of course, be opposed to wasteful new spending initiatives in an inflationary environment. We should be here holding this government to account. And if they want to go away, if the Labor Party wants to go away and do crazy deals with the Greens, well, they'll have to justify that to the electorate. I think the media, as you say, is going to be pushing them down this path. They're all drinking the Kool-Aid this morning that somehow the country's gone centre-left and we're only one election away from the government owning all the means of production, apparently, according to the ABC and The Guardian this morning. Well, let's just test that when some of these policies be implemented and we have the kind of effects we're seeing in the United States with runaway inflation, runaway crime, and a lack of border security.
I'm with you. Smithy, quick one on this.
I don't think it matters that Anthony Albanese has a majority. I don't think that actually means that he doesn't have to consult with the Teals or the Greens. The Teals and the Greens number 10. The public pressure that they will apply through their mates at the ABC and other media sources that were kind to them during that election campaign, they'll be everywhere. That pressure will grow so much that Anthony Albanese will have to adopt exactly what they want in the next 3 years, and that will be a disaster.
Yep, correct. Throw in a bit of an interest rate rise. Wait, watch and see. The slingshot effect, I think, is going to be quite interesting. The whiplash effect, I should say, is going to be quite interesting. Thank you, Senator. Future Senator. I do appreciate it. Quick break. Back with more here on Paul Murray Live. Miranda Devine with the 6 things that went wrong for the government at the last election. Miranda Devine is a rock star, which you can read, of course, in the Daily Telegraph, all the different News Corp papers, kicks ass for the New York Post as well. She has 6 different reasons as to why the election went the way that it did, and I have less than 3 minutes. So that's less than 30 seconds each. She's used to appearing on Fox News. So, Miranda, the 6 reasons. Go!
Hey, okay, Paul. Look, I think the it's time factor was the obvious one. 3 terms. Australians normally don't give a government the 4th term. There was the media-driven women's scandals, which I think were completely unfair. The ABC was driving them. That just painted ridiculously, in my opinion, the government and particularly Scott Morrison as a misogynist. And then basically climate. I mean, this was the Teals symbolism. Unfortunately, I think Scott Morrison thought that by pledging net zero, he was going to neutralise the attack. It never works because the other side is always going to outgun you. Just like you were just saying, the Greens are going to always outgun Labor. And then, look, I think there was the hatred of Scott Morrison, and that really mainly came from Victoria. I mean, I have friends there who were completely feral about him and Josh Frydenberg. They felt that he talked down to them during the pandemic and blamed them personally for the lockdowns when he was really criticising Dan Andrews. They took that personally. Then, just plain old pandemic fatigue. It's the sort of Winston Churchill effect where I think that Morrison and Frydenberg were extremely effective on any objective measure. You look at fatality rates, you look at economic growth and unemployment. They did a great job, but people were sick of the sight of them. They associated their faces with the bad times, and they want to change. And finally, this is sort of an unknown. Has COVID around the world pushed people to the left? It's a good excuse, as Jane Fonda told us, sort of God's gift to the left. It was a way that the left has seized all over the world to try and entrench government control.
How good are you? You can come and host anytime you want. She fits it right into the time. That Fox News training has got you right on par. Awesome to talk to you. I promise double the time next time. Thank you, Miranda.
Lovely to talk to you, Paul.
Good on you, mate. All right, that's our show for tonight. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Also, we're going to be in Bundaberg a little bit later in the week. If you want to join us, it's Our Town at skynews.com.au, ourtown at skynews.com.au. We're coming to Bundy, but right now, I can tell you, 10 out of 10. The reason we're in HD, the reason to sit up straight at 9 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen, Rita Panahi.